There's a point in most founder-led businesses where things just start coming back to you. You know, more decisions, more problems, more questions, stuff that you'd expect to be handled elsewhere suddenly require your input. And even though the business is growing at a good rate, you actually feel more involved than you were before. And it doesn't really feel like a problem at first. It just feels like you're staying really close to the business. It feels like you're doing a good job. You're staying on top of things. You're making sure everything's done properly. But over time, you start to notice it. Your time gets filled with the things that you probably shouldn't be dealing with. You know, the higher leverage work starts getting pushed back and the business just feels like it's a lot heavier than it used to be. It feels like it's way heavier than it should be. Now, what's actually happening here is a breakdown in effective delegation, effective being the operative word. And more specifically, there's a breakdown in altitude. The organization stops making decisions at the right level, and instead everything just starts routing right back to the top. And with this, ownership becomes way less clear. You know, responsibilities get blurred and execution starts depending on one point. And once that starts happening, you feel it pretty quickly. You know, you feel it in the way that the business is actually executing. You'll find that the decision velocity slows down because everything's waiting for input. You'll find that teams become less cohesive, less effective because they're not operating with real ownership. And you find that the work just keeps looping back instead of just moving forwards cleanly. And so even though effort stays high, the output across the board starts to drop. Now in reality, you'll see this in a number of very practical ways. You know, you're solving problems that you shouldn't even see. You're involved in decisions that you shouldn't be needed for, and you know, things don't really move unless you're pushing them. And that's where your bandwidth starts getting compressed and consumed, and execution begins to fragment across the whole organization because you don't have the time and the energy and the clarity of thought to allocate your attention to the big needle movers. And so once execution starts to slow at that level, the economics follow. You know, decisions take longer, so revenue takes longer to convert, opportunities lose momentum, and at the same time, more time and more effort and more energy and more finances are required to get things done, which just pushes your costs up. And so you end up with slow revenue velocity and higher cost structures. And that really defines economic drag. So a lot of founders don't immediately recognize this as a structural issue. They assume they just need better people or more oversight or just way tighter control. But in reality, it's not so much about effort, it's not so much about people, you know, talent, quality, desire. It's really about execution and how it's structured inside the business. And so the shift here isn't about doing more per se, it's about restoring clarity and ownership. Decisions need to sit at the right level always. That's a flat rule. And responsibility needs to actually transfer, and leadership needs to operate at the correct altitude in order for it to be effective. Because if everything just keeps looping back to the top, the system will always slow down as it grows. So to bring this plane to a landing, you know, when everything feels like it's coming back to you as the business grows, it's definitely not random. It's very much a signal that delegation is breaking down, that altitude in leadership is collapsing. And it means that, you know, typically it's associated with execution not flowing cleanly through the organization anymore. And one of the most important things for a founder to achieve in order to fix this is visibility of this actually being a bigger problem than it is currently known to be. And once you have visibility, you can begin addressing the problem by implementing the correct systems that recover this execution leakage across the board and restore execution integrity, aligning output with intended output.